What is up, guys? It's your favorite FPV guy, Random FPV, representing FPV Life and Drogen. Today I'm going to show you how to build this bad boy, the Drogen Puzzle XG230. It's one sweet ride. As most of you know, Drogen has sent me this Goblin for review and test, and to give them some feedback on it. Here's the box. It's a pretty cool unit. And one of the nice things about it, you can make it basically in two different configurations. As you see here, you have type 1, which is mid-mount battery, and type 2, which is bottom-mount battery. Very interesting, and basically you just change up the arm configuration to make that change. So today we are going to be doing the type 1 configuration. And Drogen has been kind enough to include a diagram here that you can see shows basically all the included parts on one side and how many you get, etc. If you flip it over, you're going to see the exploded view of the drone itself. It looks complicated at first, but if you look closely, you can see that basically it just starts from the bottom and you work your way up, and they've got all the screws color coded by the actual size. So every screw that's included is color coded on this exploded view, and it makes it really easy to assemble. There's some highlights as far as those screws. If you look up here, you can notice there's 3 particular screws that are different. 2 of those are going to be for the lower standoff, and 1 is for the battery XT60 connector. And the XT60 connector in this particular drone basically has a hole through it so that a standoff can go through there, and we'll get to that. It's really interesting how that works. So as you can see, I've got everything spread out, and this is what you get in the kit. Aside from the manual itself, you're going to get some stickers, and there's some really interesting stickers here. You do have to cut them out yourself, but it's not the end of the world, and kind of lets you choose what you do and don't use, so that's cool. You get a bunch of hardware, a bunch of extra hardware. As you can see here, I've got a ton left over that I don't even use for the build. And the other neat thing, you can take a 2.5mm Allen or hex head, and it's going to be able to build this entire drone with a 2.5mm driver. Alright guys, so let's get started on this build. I do want to make a quick correction. Earlier I mentioned it was a 2.5mm driver. That was actually the driver I was using on another build for the motors, and it is actually a 2mm driver you're going to need, but that 2mm driver can take care of the whole build for you. Basically, we'll start from the top. What you have is your front arm section. Then we're going to have our plates that go on our top panel. If you look on the box, it's basically these plates here. They're here. Got a VTX plate. Got some little extra carbon fiber lock-in plates here, and those are really cool. We'll get to that when we get to the assembly, but that's a really interesting idea. It's one of those attention to detail things Drogen has done, and it's really awesome. We've got the arms, the rear arms, the lower plate, the top plate. We've got the aluminum inserts, and the 3D printed mounts, which are for the feet basically that go underneath the motors. Obviously there's some more little odds and ends, flight controller, battery pad, some O-rings that go on the camera, which are really interesting, and we'll get to all this as it goes. So let's get started. So the first thing you want to notice basically when you're working on this drone, if you look at the top plate, it's got some PIM-certs here, which are inserted screw spots basically where you can lock screws into it. And on the bottom plate, you've got an engraving on one side that shows the Puzzle X. See if the other camera will focus better on that. You can see it there. You want to make sure on this particular drone at all times that your engravings are pointed out. So on the bottom plate, that would be obviously the bottom, like facing the ground. On the side panels, which also have an engraving on them, or an etching, those are going to basically follow the same configuration and basically point outwards. So just keep that in mind when you're assembling it. What you're going to need is going to be your top arm, your front arms here. You want to take your cutout and place it towards the front. You've got your 2 rear arms, and make sure when you do this assembly that you have the side where you cannot see the back of the PIM cert. So basically, this side, if you screw it from this side, you're going to end up pulling the PIM cert out. So you do not want to do that. And again, this thing's called a puzzle for a reason. They fit together like this, like a puzzle. You want to try your best to get everything as level and even as you can when you start. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but you want to get it as close as you can. Put it on a flat surface. Go ahead and take your bottom plate. One thing you want to notice on your bottom plate, guys, make sure that your engraving is facing outwards. In just a second, I've got a screw kind of stuck in here. Alright, so you want to make sure the engraving is facing outwards as such. Basically that would be facing the bottom of the drone. And if you can see these two holes here, those are going to be where your M3 by 6mm screws go through. Go ahead and line that up with your PIM certs. What I like to do is get both screws started before I really start tightening them down. And again, when you do start tightening down these screws, you just want them snug. You do not want to over tighten them. Just get them snug enough to where they will cinch the PIM certs down into the frame, and they will kind of level everything out, so to speak. You're going to feel it when it's tight and snug. Just leave it there. If you know this is going to be the final assembly, go ahead and use a little blue Loctite. There's nothing wrong with that. As you can see here, everything will be nice and level. I mean, it is flat as a board. That's what you've got on the inside, basically. Once you've got your arms into place, again, go ahead and just double check everything, make sure it's nice and flush. I'm going to cinch this one side down just a little bit more. That's when you want to grab your aluminum plates. You're going to have two aluminum plates, and you'll notice one has a cutout, and they include a 3D printed Puzzle X piece that snaps into place. I have already snapped that in. Oh, okay, it comes out pretty easily, so it kind of locks into place, but you might want to throw a ring of super glue or silicone or something like that around it. But if you're like me, you're left-handed and you've got the drone facing the front basically to your left, this Puzzle X piece is going to go right here, and this piece obviously is going to go right here. And I just want to double check my diagram and make sure that I'm not, I can even check my pictures, make sure that I'm not assembling this incorrectly. I basically only did one quick test through assembly procedure. I'm not 100% sure, so let's just make sure. Yep, so I was wrong. On the right side of the drone, this piece, the hole basically goes towards the rear. So just keep that in mind when you're doing that. So you want to put on your bottom plate, and it looks to me there are 3 holes on each side. And if you guys remember earlier, I mentioned the XT60 has a standoff that goes through it. That's going to go through right here on this back plate. So it's going to be like this, basically. I've already taken my stand off and included the screws just so I wouldn't forget which ones go through it. So let's start with that. So you're going to take your stand off, you're going to put it through this hole in the XT60. Make sure your logo's facing out, make sure your XT60 is facing to the back. Go ahead and screw that in. Don't think you have to worry about obviously cinching this one down too much right now. Actually, it's got to go through the frame. Beginner's mistake, right? Anyway, same steps, but obviously it's going to go on the frame. And little pro tip, maybe easier to lock it in from the top, just to get it to where it won't fall out. Turn the frame sideways, come up from the bottom. And again, I'm not going to over tighten this, it is going into aluminum. So I'm just going to get it snug enough to keep that critter on there.
Hold on. I got to start this motherfucker.
Hopefully I'll get it in there at all.
Wait a minute.
Alright, pro tip number 2, the longer screw goes in from the bottom. Obviously it's got quite a bit more frame to go through. You guys probably won't see this, probably edit it out. That's more like it. Okay, so we've got that. You're gonna have a bunch of, just double check my critter here. They're the 8mm screws that come up through and lock into place. They do go through the bottom plate and then through the arm and into the aluminum. So basically locking 3 different pieces together. One thing I've noticed about this frame, the carbon, you know, the screws go through it, but they're not, you have to screw it into it, which is good. I mean, it makes it solid, makes it all feel like it's really cinching up really well. Alright, so again, you're going to have 1, 2, and 3. Pay attention to this one here. It's got the standoff going into the XT60. On the other side, you got your cutout. It's going to face towards the back. Basically matches the cutout on this side. And same basic plan of attack. Take your 8mm screws. And obviously on this side you do not have to use a longer screw on the back side, because it's just going right through the carbon, through the bottom plate, through the arm, and into the aluminum. You could totally miss it like that. You guys will have to bear with me a little bit. My 3-year-old isn't wanting to go to sleep tonight, so both myself and my wife have had a little bit of a long night with him. There you go. There's all 3 on each side there, 3 and 3. Got your 2 center screws. If you can flip it over, you can feel how even and nice everything is there. So that's your next step. Pause for a thirst break. Now the next thing we're going to do is take our top plate, and again, you've got the same principle here, guys. So you want to make sure that your PIMsert, that you're screwing into the unexposed metal section, because that's going to pull that PIMsert up into the carbon as opposed to pulling it out of the carbon. So do not make that mistake. This piece is going to fit like this. So you got the PIMserts here, 1, 2, 3 matching holes there. If you'll notice, there's going to be some cutout slots, and those actually match the side panels. So again, the side panels, you've got your etching. You want to make sure that is facing towards the outside. So here's my etching. I'm going to face it this direction, and it fits perfectly into these slots. It's actually incredible how well this frame fits together. It literally is a puzzle. Kind of clicks into place. It's perfect cutting. I've not had to do any sanding, nothing like that. It does take you a second to get it exactly in the right place, but that's because it fits so tight. So see this little front edge here kind of lines up like so. And if you guys will look, you can see the front edges sit right up against the carbon. It's got the cutouts, and it's perfect. There's absolutely zero play or slack in this thing, so it's pretty incredible. Guys will give me just a second. I'll turn my air conditioner off. Sorry about that. I just realized I'd turn it back on. So. Alright, so once you get your side panels in those 3 slots, you want to make sure you fit your little side plates in. And these, again, they basically help to lock this thing into the situation, into place. And it's got 3 little spots where this will fit in. It's a really amazing design. If you guys can see this, but it fits into here. And what's going to happen when you put your screws here down through that, it's going to lock that top plate in. It's pretty incredible. Another quote-unquote pro tip, I guess we'll call it. You actually want to do that before you slide that in, your battery strap. Again, they've provided cutouts for it. You may even want to do that before you fit the side panels in, but just go ahead and slide it through. If you're like me, you'll knock a side panel out when you do it, so put the side panel back. And then you've got this little VTX piece of carbon, which I think is an awesome idea on Drogen's part. And it's going to fit in right over top of your battery strap. And it's just giving you a place, right home, so to speak, for your VTX. Just like that. Now you can put your little panel side slots in. And if you'll see on this, guys, it's got a short and two long, I guess you could say. This is the short. The short's going to go towards the back of the drone. Again, bear with me, guys. I've not done this too many times. But one thing I did notice, once you get those side slots in, you can take your little short M3s by 6s and at least put one back here into the PIM cert, and that way you don't have to worry about it falling out. Don't over tighten it, just get it snug. Again, same situation. You've got your plate with the etching out. This, you're going to take your short side. Short side goes into the back slot, just like that. And you can go ahead and screw at least that rear screw in there to the PIM cert. So at this point we have our top plate with our side plates attached to it. We've got our VTX plate in place and our little extra holder puzzle pieces there, I like to call them. They're in place as well. And now we are ready to fit this onto the aluminum. So obviously it's pretty obvious which is front back. I'll set this here. And you use the M3 by 6mm screws all the way on the top, with the exception of the battery one. I just like to get these in place. I'm not going to over tighten anything until well, not even over tighten it ever, but I'm not going to tighten it like snug even until I get every screw in. So I've not found that's an issue with this particular frame. It fits together really well. There's no need to worry about it, but just like a car rim or something, you don't want to tighten every, one bolt fully down, and then you still got all these other bolts to go. So okay. Now on the side without the XT60, you can put just a normal 6mm in it. On the other side, it's got the standoff. So I personally chose to use a longer screw. I want to say this is an 8mm screw on this side. It's just going to give that standoff and the XT60 some extra oomph, so to speak. Go ahead and check out your bottom screws and make sure those are all snug now. And come at your top screws, make sure those are all snug. Just fully cinch them down. Again, just snug, don't want to over tighten them. You're going into aluminum, so be aware of that. You will notice the frame kind of all come together at this point. All the gaps and stuff like that basically disappear. It's pretty incredible actually. Alright guys, so you actually want to install your battery pad. Move my camera here. You actually want to install your battery pad a little more, basically where it's centered with your strap. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. You want to make sure it is centered with the strap. And at this point, you're nearing the end. So there's a couple things I want to point out. I'm not going to get to them on this particular build video because I'm not going to install electronics or anything like that yet. But Drogen included these two little O-ring slots, and those are basically, they're going to fit, if you guys can see it, it's got 3 different holes here for the camera. And they've also included the screws for that. Those go in there and they give your camera some, I guess you could say jello or soft mount purposes, which I think is actually pretty cool. I don't think I've seen any frame that has the ability to soft mount a camera. So we'll get to that when we do the electronics install. I'm not even touching that tonight, but look for that in the future. My plan is to do a frame build, which is obviously now, the electronics, which would be flight controller, VTX, camera, a receiver, and motors. And then third video will be Betaflight setup. This particular drone has its own Betaflight target, which shows they have put some serious research into it, which I think is incredible. So look for that in the future. And the next thing we're going to do tonight, we're going to install our standoffs. So we're going to have 2 standoffs left. If you've noticed, I've already put the screws in them just so I wouldn't lose them. And one of the standoffs just takes the standard 6mm screw. The other one is going to take a longer screw because it's going through the aluminum. So I have found the standoffs to be a little bit of a tight fit, but that's a good thing, you know. Tight fit means the frame's going to be solid. So one standoff is going to go up here on the top. You can see these holes right this area there. The second standoff is going to go through the aluminum. So you see the 2 holes there in the aluminum. So go back to the build cam here. This top standoff is really pretty simple to get in, and it's the one that takes the shorter 6mm screws. So just get one side in place, get your screw started. Let's do it this way. Just like that. Flip it around. Take your other screw. Now once you've got them both started, grip your standoff. Cinch it down. Again, just snug. Standoffs feel super light. Pretty sure they're aluminum, so you don't want to over tighten them. They will strip. Your second standoff. One thing I noticed, there are 2 holes in the aluminum down here. You can see there's 2 holes there, but according to the diagram, that's going to go in the top hole. So we're going to take our standoff, alright guys, so now we're at the part we're going to install our second standoff, our second canopy standoff. It's our third total standoff. Obviously the first one's for the XT60, second is going to be up here. It takes the short 6mm screws, and our second canopy standoff goes to the top hole here. So you've got a bottom and a top hole. It's going to go through the top hole, and it is going to take the longer, I believe they're 8mm screws. The best way I've found to install this is to put it in basically completely flush. So push the outer sections of those side plates out, push it in flush, and just kind of slide it back. May do you some good to look through there and see if you think you can tell when it's lined up. Miraculously, I've actually got it. It looks like. Insert your screw. Again, you want to get one side started. Alright guys, so I just realized I did leave out one step in the final assembly. After you get that final standoff here in the canopy installed, you're going to take your canopy. If you notice, the canopy itself has these little clip-on spots. Take your top clip-on spot, we'll call it, and it just literally snaps onto the standoff. Like that, your nice click. And your lower standoff, same thing, you just push it, pops right into place. There you go. Your finished Drogen Puzzle 230XG frame. I'm telling you guys, I cannot wait to fly this. So big respect to Drogen, big respect to John Shin at Drogen, really appreciate it. Make sure you guys check out the FPV LIFE live stream. As always, I'm Random FPV. Thanks for tuning in. Keep flying, keep ripping, keep doing your thing.